Good afternoon. We would like to talk to you about the backside, which looks good, and our experiences with digital couriering between the Netherlands and Japan. It all started in 2016 and a bit more seriously later on in 2018 when we started working on a traveling exhibition of more than 250 objects from our collection and the Egyptian department in particular from the National Museum of Antiquities in Leiden. And a traveling exhibition that was going to go to Japan and to no more than 8 venues. Conservation started on this project in 2019, and we worked on the conservation and all the preparations with a whole team of conservators, collection managers, and more colleagues, and a project manager, of course, who you'll be seeing later on as well. Because we knew we had a short amount of time in between the venues, so we had 8 venues that switched in Japan and then would travel to another museum, and we knew we had a short time of about 3 to 4 days for a whole exhibition, and we would probably have about 2 couriers per venue, of course with a Japanese team, but because we knew we would have to work with a so-called fast installment, we took precautions and tried to prepare ourselves with by framing objects, by doing a lot of pre-mounting, by keeping objects on trays, so we would have to so we could minimize the handling of them, or placing heavy objects on purposely built pallet crates, which you can see in the lower right corner is a pyramidion which can stay on its pallet crate during and traveling in between exhibitions. We also prepared our own colleagues and the colleagues in Japan by creating an installation book, which had a page per object with handling and installation notes, and also drawings and photographs of not only the objects but also of the mounts, how to place them, how to handle them. Also because we knew not that per venue not always the same courier or the same person would be handling them, so it would be sensible to write everything down. Here you can see 2 examples of, on the top you can see an example of a small mount with the image of the object and a description how to use it, and of course the inventory number, and below you can see a small instruction drawing of a system for hanging frames, for example, which might seem very logical, but for someone who isn't used to working with a certain system or a certain type of mount, it can be very useful to have these types of drawings, as you possibly know as well. We also prepared a tool cart with mounting tools and screws and all types of extra mounts, and also a small conservation kit with types of glue, adhesives, also some solvents that we could bring. One note there is that it turned out we couldn't bring sturgeon glue into Japan because it has a CITES annotation, so we had to take that out of the tool cart, but we did all kinds of preparations before the exhibition went to Japan. These are also some drawings and some photographs. They're not the nicest drawings, but hopefully they're clear, on some mounts we made. So we have the image of the object, a drawing, sort of sketch of how to place the object on the mount, and hopefully an idiot-proof way of sending your objects to installation. We also did some experimenting with condition reporting, because we do have a lot of experience with traveling exhibitions also in this size with a lot of objects, but usually we just mainly did condition reporting either with a lot of text or with a lot of photographs, and they didn't always prove to be that useful, or the combinations didn't really work that well. So we did some experimenting, and in the end we did again a sort of combination of mappings with a lot of photographs, but it's still in progress. We also did prepared documentation and instructions for the packing of objects and also the unpacking, so very clear lists of all the crates and all the objects inside.
And I'll continue to life versus life, because of course, as everyone knows, in 2022 March, life happened, and we were planning to send the whole collection to Japan in March 2020. Everything was ready. There were 36 crates standing at our transport company, and then suddenly all transport ceased because the whole world closed up. So there was first a frantic searching of the possibility of sending the exhibition to Japan, because the first thing that stopped was air traffic. And as you might remember, there was a problem in Japan with a cruise ship that had a lot of COVID-19 infections. So Japan was quite quickly completely locked, and we had to decide to postpone the installation. So from April 2020, it went to September 2020, and two venues decided to go to the end of the tour and catch up with the exhibition again in 2022. So when we finally decided, when the whole world had calmed down a bit after the summer, to send our objects, we had to rethink, of course, the installation, because we couldn't send couriers anymore, because it's still very difficult to get into Japan. It's just hardly possible to get a visa at the moment, so you just can't travel there. And we sent our objects first in August without any couriers on board of the plane. So we waved them goodbye at Schiphol, and then they arrived in Japan, where my colleague Yuki picked them up from the airport and brought them to the first venue. And thankfully in Japan, we already knew the colleagues. They had been here in 2019 in preparation for the exhibition, so they had seen the object, they had seen our ways that we were planning to install them. And of course, they had the installation book and all the photos and everything we sent. And they made sure to have lots and lots of cameras over there. We had, I think, 4 cameras. We had to decide what objects we wanted to be there for digital installation, because we couldn't check everything. The time difference is 9 hours, and I don't think any one of us would have survived if we had to look on to the installation for 9 hours each day, starting at, say, 2 o'clock at night. We had to start at 6 o'clock in the morning. That was already bad enough, but we made a selection because we knew them, because we knew they had handled our objects before. We trusted them with things like a shapti or small scarabs, and we decided to look on with the really difficult objects. In Japan, there was a setup with 2 cameras. An interpreter was over there. We had an interpreter with us, which you can see at the top picture. You can see my colleague Jeroen and interpreter René, who interpreted Dutch, English. And of course, there was a good planning of which objects we were going to install each day and which object we definitely wanted to see. And interpreter René has also had been given a crash course in exhibition installation, so he knew all the terms for things like silicon tubing in Japanese. You know, it's not something you used in your daily life. It was fun for the Japanese colleagues to see our daily life just at the background, because we didn't always blur our background. And we worked partly from home, partly from Leiden. So you see again at the top, that's our meeting room, but below is Helbertijn's 2 kids. And you know, working from home was safe corona-wise, and it was very convenient because you didn't have to catch a train at 5 a.m.
Back to me again. Yes, we were planning to talk mainly about our experiences with the Japan exhibition, but in the meantime, we've also had experiences with 2 other exhibitions where we functioned as the loan taker and not just as the loan giver. So we thought it might be nice to also share some experiences with those 2 exhibitions with you. So we also did an exhibition with Malta, which was a very nice way to practice, because we only had 1 lender or museum during this exhibition. So all of the collection came from the same museum, and the curator had been to the museum in Malta, so knew the collection, and knew the conservator and the curator there. So there was a lot of mutual trust, which was really nice. And we did a fixed setup with tables, lights, camera, and we also had we hired a cameraman who had a handheld iPhone and stabilizer, which worked really well because you can move around through the exhibition while installing objects. After that, this winter we also did another exhibition, which was a bit more of a challenge because we had 28 lenders or museums that gave us objects for this exhibition. So it's a much larger exhibition and many more parties to work with. But because we also had a lot of showcases where a lot of these different museums were together in the same showcase. So we had different digital couriers working on the same showcase. That proved to be quite a challenge, especially for planning. And sometimes couriers had to wait quite a long time, or we missed an appointment, or we had to come back to a certain digital courier. So that was a bit difficult. But again, the hardware worked really well. So we worked with iPhones and handheld stabilizers, and we worked with different teams to be able to work with all of these couriers, online couriers, and we did have some real live couriers as well, but we worked in several teams, so this was a much larger project. And we have permission from the Getty Museum to show you these images because we were very impressed with their preparation and all of the installation leaflets, printouts and information they gave us beforehand. So we talked to them beforehand to talk through all of their objects before they came to Leiden. But they also made mock-ups of some of their objects, and you can see that one on the left. This is a large marble cuirass which had a support, and they made a mock-up of the object, which worked as a template, so you could place the mock-up and then knew exactly where to drill a hole. So I mean, this would also work for smaller objects, so you would minimize handling and facilitate mounting and placing objects. So we thought this was a really nice example to show that preparation is super important. And an evaluation. So we did have some technical issues with the phones, with ear sets, just getting everything to work, laptops in the museum, enough electricity, network cables, etc. But we worked through all of that, and it was super. We learned a lot. Working with Wi-Fi versus good old-fashioned cables was also sometimes a choice, and often cables work better or Wi-Fi was too feeble. This was also an issue with Japan because a lot of the museum buildings have really thick walls, lots of concrete, so have terrible Wi-Fi. So this was also something to think about beforehand so you could problem solve afterwards. I mentioned already the planning issues in setting up calls. We were able to work with it, but it's something to think about. On a conservation side, I mean, as a conservator, I would much prefer, of course, checking objects and guiding objects in real life than digital. And we did have in Japan one example of damage, and we were set with the dilemma: do we do nothing, or do we treat the object when it comes back? Do we trust the conservator there enough to treat it for us, maybe write a how-to, or do we stabilize, or do we apply facings, or do we wait for a courier from the museum to be able to go to Japan and do it then? So there are, of course, difficulties. Also, what was really difficult is that the actual condition checking we couldn't do because we really couldn't see very well. As you can see in the image, it's completely difficult to actually look at the object. So you have to trust the people there. Yeah. You can also think, is installation digitally really that different? Because we've noticed that not all couriers from museums actually handle their own objects, and sometimes they they leave it in our hands anyway. So in that sense, it's perhaps similar to installations in the past. It was also nice, Hanneke already said it, it was also nice to see a bit of the home situation during the 2 years that we've had COVID. We've shared images of ourselves working from home, even if we couldn't see each other in real life. So we have some tips and tricks. If possible, take the possibility of the digital installation into account. So really prepare for anything that could happen, and yeah, also try to think of planning when actually making the design of an exhibition. Make sure everyone knows how to work the devices, make sure everything works, and that you really prepare all your instructions as well. Thank you for your attention. Bye.